Hello, this is Joan Friedman, your host on All Ways, ALLWAYS. ALL for the Academy for Lifelong Learning, associated with Cape Cod Community College on beautiful Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The purpose of this broadcast is to introduce the Academy to a broad audience. We plan to introduce you to our wonderful coordinators, talk about our curriculum, events, our catalogs, our many publications, and to introduce our members. Last month, we had with us Dr. Anton Yereniuk, who gave us a background on his family's native Ukraine and brought us up to the invasion of February 24th of 2022. Anton left us with a great deal of information and me with a great deal of interest in knowing a little bit more about what is actually going on now, what has happened since February of 2022 as Americans. What can Americans do through the structures that we have as, say, NATO or the Budapest Doctrine, and what else is it that Ukraine, its government, and its people are needing right now. So I hope that you listen to the second part of our series with Anton. So Anton, please.
Thank you, Joan.
Bring us up to speed.
It's nice to be back because this is a story that needs to be told. And what I'm going to do now is, again, reiterate that on February 24th, 2022, Putin's Russia invades and attacks Ukraine in an unprovoked war to destroy Ukraine. Putin felt that within 7 days he would occupy Kyiv, but it didn't happen. And before we go a little bit further, I would like to do a brief discussion on modern Ukrainian nationalism. And the way I want to introduce that is to introduce you to the Ukrainian national anthem. The Ukrainian national anthem was not written yesterday or 5 years ago, but it was written decades and decades ago. Again, Putin does not understand that Ukraine is a sovereign nation no matter who is occupying and ruling the nest. Ukrainian national anthem, and I'll read it to you to get a flavor in Ukrainian with a translation. Ще не вмерла Україна і слава і воля. Ukraine's glory has not yet died, nor her freedom. Ще нам, браття молоді, усміхнеться доля. Upon us, my young brothers, fate shall yet smile. Згинуть наші вороженки, як роса на сонці. Our enemies will perish like dew in the morning sun. Запануємо і ми, браття, у своїй сторонці, and we too shall rule, brothers, in our own land. Душу і тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. Souls and bodies will lay down all for our freedom. І покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. And we will show that we, brothers, are the Cossack nation. Now, if you are a sovereign nation with a national anthem like that, with a confirmed enemy, you can understand how Ukrainian nationalism has risen.
I remember the first time that I read that. I think you probably sent it to us.
Yes.
Anton and I have been part of a discussion group through the Academy of Lifelong Learning with Dr. Tom Murphy called Global Futures, and Anton sent that out to us, and I can remember at the time thinking how absolutely poignant it was and how absolutely, literally on point that it was in February of 2022.
Yeah, those words were not written
Right.
on February 24th.
And it said volumes to the character of the people.
Correct.
And of course we've seen that play out over the past 2+ years of absolutely what they said that they would do. They would defend themselves to the last man that was their land, and that's what's happening.
Yeah. Now, due to the intense Russification over the centuries by the czars, the communists under Stalin with the Holodomor, the Red Famine, the majority of Ukrainians in the eastern half of Ukraine were essentially Russian in language, somewhat so in culture, and so leaned towards Russia in terms of politics, religion, and so forth. So in 2010, there were two Ukraines. The West included Kiev, Lviv was Ukrainian-speaking, supported splitting from Russian influence in favor of the rest of Europe. But the East was ambivalent, including the areas of the Donbass, Kharkiv, Mariupol, Crimea. They had many Ukrainians of Russian ancestry who tended to avoid the Ukrainian language, the Ukrainian nationalism, and leaned towards a Russian influence. Apathy in the West, due to corruption in politics in Ukraine, led to a split in the vote and in the election, resulting in the victory of a Russian-leaning Viktor Yanukovych, as I mentioned last month, in the election of 2010. He was pro-Putin, eventually switched sides to abandon joining the EU and NATO and forming an alliance with Putin. This included a 25-year deal that will allow Russian Navy to use Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. And in November 2013, the Ukrainians peacefully protested against Yanukovych. And this ended in February 2014 with the ouster of their president, as I had previously mentioned. Yanukovych fled to Moscow under the threat of being arrested for corruption against the state. Putin goes ballistic, immediately annexes Crimea, and begins the battle for separation in the Donbass in April of 2014. Ukrainians sent their military to the Eastern Front. The battles there have raged for those past 8 years. However, during this time, American and Canadian military experts signed up to help modernize a professional Ukrainian army of 200,000 soldiers. And it's that professionalism that we've been seeing as Ukraine defends itself against the Russian invasion. All of a sudden, Ukrainians all over Ukraine realized that Putin's Russia wanted to subjugate them under Moscow's rule. In fact, 80% left the Donbass. 95% of residents in Kharkiv and Mariupol claimed Ukrainian nationalism, despite being Russian-speaking. They showed no desire to follow Putin, even though Putin was saying that he wanted to liberate these areas. Soon Kiev declared that the only national language in Ukraine would be Ukrainian. This royally upset Putin. It gets worse for Putin because in 2019, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church abandoned being under the Russian Patriarchy, and the Ukrainian Church applied and was declared an independent member of the world's Christian Orthodox Church with its own patriarchy. This upset Putin and Kirill, the Russian Orthodox Patriarch in Moscow, who, believe it or not, and can you really describe someone like Kirill, a Christian, who blessed Putin's invasion of Ukraine? It's unbelievable. Putin's action allowed Ukrainian nationalism to rise to this incredible level. Both Ukrainian-speaking and Russian-speaking folks claim that first and foremost they are Ukrainian. It's akin to Canada, where in Ontario, English-speaking, and Quebec, French-speaking, describe themselves as Canadian. Ironically, Putin's massacre civilians in Mariupol, Kharkiv, Kherson, and was killing those same Russian-speaking Ukrainians that he said he was liberating, the ones he apparently wanted to save from the cave government of Nazis and criminals, quote unquote. So due to Putin's aggression, the invasion has united Ukrainians like never before. It's now a united country fighting for its existence. This invasion also united NATO and the EU like never before. Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas has ended. Germany expanded its war machine. Poland tilted completely away from Russia. Finland has now joined NATO. Sweden will follow shortly. And on the so that Ukrainian nationalism brought back two other concepts that I just wanted to share, and that is the Red Famine and Stalin's production of the Holodomor. Again, Holod is Ukrainian for starvation. More is Latin for death. It was the 90th anniversary of the Ukrainian genocide perpetrated by Stalin in 1932-33. In Canada, throughout the world, April is the month to commemorate the victims of the Holodomor. It's often held the week after Easter. The Holodomor is one of 9 global genocides recognized by the Canadian government. At its peak in 1933, by April there was nothing left to eat because many villages had all their food removed by Stalin's decree. Deaths increased from 12,000 a day in February to 20,000 per day in April. Between 5 and 10 million Ukrainians perished. Today we have another genocide, Putin's war. Since February 24th, 2022, the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, cities and villages are being bombed and shelled indiscriminately. The Russians are using illegal cluster bombs. There's complete destruction of residential areas, schools, hospitals, churches, museums, nursing homes, Ukrainian Orthodox churches, and numerous cultural landmarks. Daily deaths mount of innocent children, women, and elderly. As in Mariupol, many hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are starving in basements with little food, water, heat, or electricity during that horrific time. Due to Russian blockades, Putin allows no humanitarian corridors, even when sponsored by the Red Cross. Putin, like Stalin, questioned the very legitimacy of Ukrainian statehood and sovereignty and the very existence of a Ukrainian culture and state. It is my premise that he has completely read history in a bizarre fashion, and there is no accuracy to any statements that he makes in that regard. He simply desires an eradication of the entire Ukrainian nation. 10 million Ukrainians are displaced internally and in Eastern Europe. Today, back in April when I first wrote some of this documentation, Putin congratulated his military forces for their excellent work in freeing, quote-unquote, Mariupol, ignoring the fact that 90% of Mariupol was flattened, 100,000 residents at that time could not escape to avoid the bombardment, and the vast majority of the residents of Mariupol were those same Russian-speaking, including the tens of thousands who have died since February 24th. So now we're in the 15th month of this war. I wanted to now bring you to what my older brother Roman is doing in Canada. My brother, bless his heart, he's 6 years older than me. He is a retired professor at the University of Manitoba in religious studies and history of Ukrainian Orthodox religion. He started a foundation called Project Lyubov. Lyubov is the Ukrainian word for love, Project Love. And at that time, for the past 15 years, he was using the funds to help provide projects to support the various orphanages in Western Ukraine. In 2022, he decided to raise funds for the refugees in Western Ukraine and Kiev. He raised $43,000 in 2022 and almost the same this year thus far. He wanted to distribute it to the internally displaced refugees in Western Ukraine, and he personally is acquainted with his contacts, so the money was well spent, and the breakdown was medical supplies to hospitals and clinics, 51%, school supplies for children, including hobby kits and so forth, 23%, clothing, 22%, books, 4%, and the number that I liked the best was marketing, 0%. He just does this voluntarily. The disbursements went to 2 hospitals, 2 schools, and 2 orphanages.
There aren't many projects that have 0 overhead.
Right.
I know when I heard that I was very impressed.
Yeah, a significant number of refugees continue also across the borders in Romania, Moldova, and Poland, and then a smaller number have found refuge in Canada, United States, Australia. And so I got word in February of this year that one of our cousin's daughters, Nadia Lacusta, was arriving in Winnipeg along with her daughter, 8-year-old, and son, 10-year-old, plus her friend Lassia with her 2 children and her friend's mother. The husband's staying behind to help with the war effort. Nadia's husband is a beekeeper, and he's helping on the security side with the war. So Roman found a house to rent for all 7. So there are 2 families living together. The Canadian government provides 2 weeks of hotel accommodations when the refugees arrive, and then $3,000 per person for the adults and $1,500 per person per child. Now, once the 2 ladies find jobs, they're in their late 20s. The grandmother will be babysitting once the 4 kids come home from school, and they're all in elementary school. He collected money from the 4 of us. I have 3 brothers, and we went out and bought them all brand new mattresses so they could sleep with comfort, peace, and knowing that those are brand new mattresses. Sadly, we also heard that 2 sons of our cousins were sent to Bakhmut in the Eastern Front, where the terrible destruction of that city has gone on. Fortunately, we have not heard of any negative news in regards to their safety. One of the cousin's sons is on the Belarus border in a security position. So Easter came by in April, and I get this note from Winnipeg from my cousin's daughter, and she writes in Ukrainian. I translated it. Greetings to Anton and Joanne, my wife. Glory to Jesus this Easter. We're feeling so positive. Thank you from Nadia Lakusta from Bukovina province in Ukraine, that's where my dad was born, who now resides in Winnipeg, Canada. We want to thank you for your support. Alexander and Nadia, that's her husband, and then their son Stanislav and daughter Evelina. So my other brother, older brother Emil, was an educator. He taught middle school and became a vice principal before he retired. And it was with his retirement that he had the free time to go to Ukraine to monitor all those elections from 2004 to 2014. But he sends me summaries, daily updates from the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress as they're monitoring the war in Russia. And so the last little blurb that I had, it's okay if I go ahead and read that?
Sure, go ahead.
It was a BBC report. Russian missiles have hit Ukraine's capital. This is dated May 29th, 2023. Have hit Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, following 2 nights of heavy drone strikes. They were all reportedly shot down, and there are no reports of casualties. Flaming debris from the intercepted missiles landed in residential areas in central Kyiv. Russia continues to launch attack after attack on the Ukrainian capital this month. What was unusual is that now he's not only sending them during the night, but during the day, right into the middle of the capital. All other assaults on the capital so far in May have taken place at night and appear directed at critical national infrastructure and air defenses on the outskirts. But now the ballistic missiles used in the latest attack are going right into the inner city. Air raid sirens reportedly rang out across several other Ukrainian regions. Local military commanders in Kyiv accuse Russia of changing its tactics and deliberately targeting the civilian population. Certainly appears that Moscow wants to step up its pressure on Ukraine even further ahead of any counteroffensive. These have been very difficult days for the Kyiv residents. Imagine during the day your kids are in school and these rockets are...
No, I can't imagine trying to carry on any type of a normal life.
It's absolute insanity. Almost every night the skies look and sound like another Star Wars episode. But we don't feel much of Russian rockets hitting their targets here within the city. This is all thanks to the decent countries, Americans included, decent people of the world who gave us these air defenses. Living in the capital was anything but normal at the moment, said Mr. Shcherba, the ambassador at large at the Foreign Affairs Ministry, adding that drone attacks and sleepless nights have become part of our routine. Mr. Zelensky called the military commanders heroes as they continued to protect Kyiv from these drone attacks. And then Voice of America reported U.S. Senator, Republican Senator Graham was visiting Ukraine on May 26th. He made some statements following his trip to Ukraine. Quote, just finished a great visit with President Zelensky, Kyiv Mayor Klitschko, who used to be, by the way, the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, and Ukrainian defense officials. Quote, I've never been more optimistic about the ability of the Ukrainians to go on the offense and take back their territory from the Russians. On this trip, it is clear to me, he continues, that the Russians have been bloodied and weakened. We must provide munitions and additional long-range artillery to make the counteroffensive a success. While there are no magic weapons, the right weapons in the hands of determined Ukrainian people creates magic on the battlefield. Victory for Ukraine. End of quote. And I just heard that Putin has sent out an arrest warrant to arrest Senator Lindsey Graham for his comments. So there you go. Life is unbelievable.
Anton, I can't thank you enough for your time and your very compelling story, a story of your family, how you even got to Canada and to the United States, and what your family continues to do. I wanted to shine a little light, however, on Project UBOV.
Yes.
Am I saying that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
UBOV,
Perfect.
which means Project Love. Is that Anton? Last time I spoke with you, you said that they had gotten about 52 families out of Ukraine and had resettled them in Canada. Is that still accurate?
I would say it's probably closer to 60 now.
And probably probably higher than that.
And there's I would say in Winnipeg, which is a population of about 500,000, there are probably 100,000 residents of Winnipeg that have some connection to a Ukrainian heritage.
Okay.
And so there are a number
really
of
heavily Ukrainian.
there are Protestant churches, there are Ukrainian Catholic churches, Ukrainian Orthodox churches that are voluntarily helping in this effort. They are doing it in a way that will provide self-sufficiency for the refugees, teaching them English, integrating them into the workforce. It's very interesting. I heard a youngster that a refugee somewhere in the United States from this whole war effort, and this kid is probably 8 years of age, and you couldn't even detect an accent 1 year in the school system in the United States.
Adapted.
So these kids adapt just that quickly.
Yeah, that quickly.
Unbelievable.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And and I hope that they reunited with their dads and husbands and
Right.
sons at some time. If anybody wanted to contribute to Project UBOV, which again is 100% goes directly towards getting families to safety, whether it's out of Ukraine into Canada, but 100% of the proceeds go towards helping mothers, women, and children reach a safe port. So again, Anton, I wish we had more time. I wish. Well, I could listen to you and the story of Ukrainian history and your family all day. But we do have to wrap this up. So again, I'd like to say thank you, and I hope that you've enjoyed our broadcast and that you'll turn in again to All Ways and listen to our instructors and our members and their stories. We'd love to have you contact us at capecodall.org and get on our mailing list. Once you get on our mailing list, you'll get our catalog and our information about our speakers, as well as our monthly newsletter, which you will get your active links to all of our podcasts and broadcasts. We'd love to have you sign up for our courses. We're always looking for coordinators to add to our rich curriculum. We have openings for volunteers on many boards, including here at the broadcast studio, in helping us with ALL and our video casts. There's plenty of work to do to keep a mini college going just with volunteers. Please remember to like us on Facebook, very important, and also to find us on YouTube. If you type in ALL Cape Cod, you should be able to find our podcast and our broadcasts. So Anton and I would like to thank you for listening, and again, remember to contact us at capecodall.org.